Hello and welcome to my landscape photography editing tutorial. Today I'm gonna take this raw file and create a picture like this out of it while explaining to you every single adjustment I do from start to finish. This was a picture I shot 2 years back on a Swiss mountain in the winter, so it's 2 years back, and unfortunately I messed up the exposure right here. Right here you can see that these two areas, this little cloud and also this lake down here, is unfortunately overexposed, meaning there is absolutely no detail in these areas that light up red right here. However, I still think I can make the overall picture look great, so I'm just kinda gonna ignore these two spots right here, even though it's not ideal at all. If you have such a high contrasty scene, you really should use exposure blending or HDR. But anyways, I'm gonna start here with editing. First of all, bringing up the shadow, just a ton of detail, and I'm also gonna bring down the highlights kinda a lot, maybe around 60, so we have a lot of detail to work with. Then I'm gonna bring up the whites while holding down the Alt key. Usually I wanna make sure that there's nothing clipped, but I'm just gonna ignore these two spots right here for this picture. So we have a lot of dynamic. Here is before the whites and here's after the whites. Looks way better than the blacks. Now blacks, I often like to bring down the blacks, and this look is definitely very valid and I like it. But for this case, I think bringing up the blacks might even work better, because I really like this very light look and a lot of detail in the shadows, especially in this forest down here. So I'm just gonna leave it like that for the start. I can always add local contrast later. So that looks pretty good. Let's go to the overall contrast slider, and if I would go even further, minus contrast here, that really changes the picture in a way that I don't really like, and it really gets too flat for my taste. And by adding contrast, it kinda is almost too much, so I'm actually just gonna leave the contrast slider at 0. Then clarity is definitely very subjective. You can go both ways here. Just, don't go just into plus. Also play around with minus, because sometimes you can really end up with a really different and very unique mood and feel and look to the picture when you go into minus clarity. Which one you like better, of course, is just completely up to you. And in this case, I actually think I'm just gonna leave the clarity at 0 for now as well, and then add some local clarity maybe later with the local adjustments. Then another very important thing is the color temperature. Now you could go definitely both ways, as with every slider, and I mean, you could go for the very cool look, or you could go for the kind of neutral look, or you could go for the warm look. Now, of course, very subjective at the end. I really don't have any set tactic when it comes to color slider, but in this case I'm just gonna grab this little pinpointer and drag it over a white part in the snow, and it's just kind of gonna neutralize my white point, and I think that works the best for this picture. And also a thing that I want to mention, vibrance and saturation. If you want to add one of those, then I would suggest you to add vibrance, because it adds color way more subtle and it makes it look way more natural than when I would, for example, add saturation here. So in my case, I think I'm gonna add a little bit of vibrance just because it's a raw file and we did not add very much clarity at all, so I think a little bit more vibrance works pretty well here. Then tonal curve. Tonal curve is my second favorite adjustment module here, and the thing that I always like to do here is bring up the highlights. Highlights will just enhance the very bright parts of your image. So unlike the highlight slider down up here, which pretty much affects all of the bright parts of your image, this one will just affect the very bright part. And I really like to bring it up because it adds a lot of dynamic into the picture. Then the rest of these sliders down here really are different for every picture. Just play around with them and stick with whatever works best. In my case, I think I'm gonna bring up the darks and to the shadows here. maybe even bring down the shadows just slightly. Shadows are just like highlight slider in the tonal curve, they just affect the very dark parts of your picture, so completely different to the shadows up here, which pretty much affect the entire darkish part of your picture. So I'm done with the tonal curve HSL tool. Here you could play around with it. It doesn't have the biggest impact to your picture, but especially if you're still learning and you want to see what the sliders do, then I suggest you to just go to hue, saturation and luminance separately. First of all hue, and click this little point right here, and then you can drag this little pinpointer over to a color you want to change, and then just press down left mouse click and bring up and down your mouse to change the hue of the color. Now this really once again doesn't have that great of an impact to your picture, but for this case I think I'm gonna go more into the dark blues here for the mountains. And I mean, this picture is just pretty much blue. There is some green, but I found that if you go to the HSL tool, you really just want to adjust the main colors of the picture. So for example, if you're shooting a sunset, that would probably be orange and maybe the reds, and in this case it's really just blue, which is the overwhelming most prominent color here. Then I want to go back down to saturation here and do the same as I did before, and I think I'm not going to change anything in the saturation. And lastly luminance, well, I think I'm gonna go a little bit plus here. So as you can see, here's before the HSL tool, here's after. Not a big difference, looks a little bit better though. Then let's go down to split toning. Now split toning is definitely something I'm gonna do a separate tutorial on later, but I definitely suggest you to go into the highlights, especially of your landscape pictures, and just press this little box right here and then play around with the colors. First of all, go really high in saturation so you actually see what the color looks like, and then you can add some color in the highlight parts of your image, and it's completely different to the color adjustment that up here, because the color temperature really adjusts color very evenly over your picture, whereas by adding color with the split toning tool you really can get a lot of differentiation in the color, and it's not really super even. Now there's definitely a few looks that I really like here. For example, I like the kind of orangey look. Here's before, here's after, and I would also like a kind of pinkish look, even though it may seem a little bit over edited to some. I also like this look, but in this case I think I'm gonna opt for a pretty orangey color. First of all, just gonna put the saturation way up so I actually see the difference between the color when I fine tune it. And then once I found the perfect color, I'm gonna bring down the saturation to a value to where it looks best and also natural. So you can see here in the highlights in split toning, I really like to add orange, whereas by adding orange with the color temperature, I don't like this look. So really love the highlight slider of split toning. Definitely a tool you want to work with and definitely want to see what looks you can achieve. Then shadows is pretty much the same as highlights, just with the shadows, as the name probably explains to you. But I really don't use shadows very much because I really don't like the look as much as the highlights, and if I add both I often find it to be a little bit too much. So in this case I think I'm just gonna leave the shadows at 0 as well. Then detail. Now detail, I really like this tool, and you would definitely want to make sure that you zoom in 1:1 here so you actually see what you do, so you can actually see how much sharpening and stuff you add. So here, sharpening. I really like sharpening for my pictures, even though this picture was, by the way, shot with a Canon 18-55 kit lens on a Canon 600D, so very inexpensive lens, but as you can see we already have a lot of sharpness here. but I definitely want to add even more because I really like sharpening, especially if you're gonna print your image. You're definitely gonna see the difference between not add any sharpening and adding sharpening. And even if you have a much sharper and a much more expensive lens, I still think that sharpening really does a really nice job in a lot of the cases. So I've added some sharpening, it looks much sharper, but now I want to zoom back out again and bring the masking slider to the right. I want to hold down the Alt key and just bring it to the right, and what this does is adding a masking to the sharpening, meaning everything that is white is going to be sharpened and everything that is black is not going to be sharpened. So you want to make sure that you don't really sharpen too much of non-textured surface or places with very little texture, such as the sky or this lake right here, smooth water, or for example this spot of snow right here. Even though there is some texture, I really don't want it sharpened because it adds more noise than it helps the picture. So you just want to make sure that you find a nice midpoint here. I mean, you don't have to get it perfect. You're always gonna add a little bit of sharpening in the non-textured surfaces regardless, but you just want to make sure that you do it as good as you can, and definitely I think that looks way better. Let's zoom here in back 1:1, and here's before sharpening and masking, and here's after. So you can see it looks way sharper without looking unnatural. And by the way, here's masking at 0 and here's masking at 70. So you can see it really makes the whole picture stay sharp where it's needed, but it also reduces the kind of fake, overly sharpened and noisy look of the areas that don't really have that much texture. So really a long talk about sharpening. Now noise reduction is a completely different thing than sharpening. I really don't like the tool. If you have a super noisy picture, then yes, it is worth to bring up the noise reduction, but if you just have a little bit of noise, then I really would suggest you not to even work with this slider, because if I bring it to the right even slightly, it takes away so much of the detail and makes everything look so plasticky, and I really don't like that look. I really like the additional sharpness and additional detail by just leaving the noise reduction at 0. But once again, if you have a very noisy picture, that's definitely a trade-off that you have to do. And then to my third and last detail tool adjustment slider, which is the color slider. I really love this slider. It's absolutely one of the most underestimated sliders of Lightroom. A lot of people don't even work with it, don't even try it out, but the difference it can make is huge. So I'm just gonna bring the color slider here to the right around 80, and you can see all of this purple and green sensor noise that you can see over this picture, over this picture, especially in these trees and in the dark and shadow areas. It is so drastic to before and after, and it makes your picture look so much cleaner while not having any bad effect on any color or any other aspect of your picture. So absolutely love this slider. You probably really have to watch it on a pretty big screen and in HD to see the difference, but once again, here's before and here's after. Looks so much cleaner, especially if you print your work. Then the end of the global adjustments is near. Let's go down here to the lens corrections. Lens corrections is really basic. I always go to enable profile corrections and then just choose my lens, and it will get rid of the distortion, and that's definitely a great thing. Sometimes I like to bring down the vignetting that is removed because I think it looks better, but I sometimes even leave it in, so it's really up to you, but you definitely can play around with the vignetting tool here. But distortion is definitely the main goal of this tool, and I think it does a really great job. And the last thing in the lens corrections is removing chromatic aberration. Just check mark this little box right here and it will get rid of the chromatic aberration in your shot. If I zoom here back 1:1 again, Here is before. You can see this line of green, purplish fringing, and here's after. Just looks a lot cleaner. Definitely a super easy tool that I just enable for every single of my pictures. Then down here to effects. Here you can pretty much, the only thing you can do is add vignetting. And vignetting is a tool I use quite a lot of the times to give more attention towards the center of the picture and really create some more differentiation in terms of lighting. But I also, it's completely up to you if you want it. I really would suggest you to play around with it, but if you want to add some vignetting or not is of course at the end up to you. In this case I think I'm gonna add a little bit of minus vignetting here. You definitely don't want to go plus, otherwise it will look completely terrible. But if you go just a little bit minus, that can sometimes help the overall picture. Grain, just ignore grain, it really has it, that'll make your picture look terrible. And let's go down to the camera calibration instead, and this really is a great tool. Profile is probably the most important here, so you just want to go through all of these profile presets and at the end just stick with whatever looks best to you. So this will just change the saturation, the lighting, the clarity and the contrast aspects of your picture, and pretty much will change the look of your picture. So just suggest you to go through them and just stick with whatever works best. The camera landscape is definitely over the top here, but I really like camera landscape for some of my sunset pictures. Let's see, camera portrait. I kind of like this look, it's very vibrant and kind of bright. And here would be camera standard. I think I'm gonna like camera standard a bit better than camera portrait. Let's see, Adobe standard versus camera standard, and I definitely like camera standard better. So you can see, very easy thing, definitely play around with these and just stick with whatever works best. And the last and final global adjustments would be the primary color sliders. Here you can change the primary colors, but I really don't think they have that big of an impact to your picture. They have a little bit more impact than the HSL slider, but overall you really can leave them out, unless of course if you're learning. But because I want to keep this video kind of short, even though it's already very long, I'm just gonna leave them out. But there's really no set tactic to them, so there's really nothing I could show you anyways. But here is before the camera standard profile change, and here's after. So we're done with the global adjustments, so now is the fun part, which is the local adjustments. Local adjustments, really I would suggest you to take some time and do them, because they really can change the way your picture looks, and it can make your picture look a lot more complex and a lot better. So a thing that I often like to at least try is to grab a graduated filter, kinda go into the minus exposure here, and just drag a very harsh filter over the picture, over the bottom of your picture. Now in this case it really doesn't work, but sometimes it does work to give additional vignetting and to kind of add a closing out of the picture. Here is before and here's after. Maybe it actually does work, because it kind of gives some nice differentiation in this large snow patch from kind of dark to medium to very bright, and I actually kind of like that, I think. So here it actually does work, despite I thought it would not. But anyways, I'm gonna try the same with the top part, and in the top it actually does work as well. So I really like these graduated filter to close out the picture on the bottom and on the top. Here is before, here's after. Really helps you to kind of contain your eye movement within the picture and without going outside, if that made any sense. But I really like this look, before and after. And then a very important thing as well is dodge and burning. Now dodge and burning is making individual parts darker or brighter, but you can also mix these with contrast or clarity, or even go minus contrast or minus clarity. But what the purpose of these adjustments is to complexify the light and create more interest. So you could use either the adjustment brush or the radial filter with it. I usually like to use the radial filter, so that's what I'm gonna do here. And first of all, I'm just gonna go minus exposure. I'm gonna add a little bit of contrast and leave the rest how it is. The feather, you want to make sure that you bring the feather to 100 and that you invert the mask, and then you just want to bring some radial filters over your image and then just drag them around. And I really like to make dark spots even darker, and for example here in this mountain in the background, I think I might even add a little bit of clarity here and bring down the contrast and bring up the exposure just a slight bit in return. And I definitely like this look. Then you just can right click duplicate and maybe bring one over here, and that way you really can create some depth and some differentiation in terms of color to your picture. It's definitely optional, and in this picture it's not a great example, but in a lot of my other landscape pictures, for example sunsets especially, I really like the effect of dodge and burning, and it really can change the look of your picture completely. And once you're done with the minus exposure filters, you can go into plus exposure and add some plus exposure filters in your picture. And in this case I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna speed up the footage because it's really not interesting to watch me doing like 3 minutes of dodge and burning and moving around filters. So I'll see you in a second. So I've added some dodge and burning. It really depends on the picture which amount of difference it makes. Here's before, here's after, and you can see even a picture like this, it really added a lot of differentiation and a lot of interest. The point is just to complexify the light without your viewer even noticing that you've added any dodge and burning, so you just want to make sure that it looks natural. So at the start I said that I wanted to keep the clarity relatively neutral, so now I'm gonna change that by grabbing a graduated filter and just drag one over the front portion right here. Make sure you have a pretty soft edge, and here I'm just gonna bring up the clarity for the foreground, so that way it really looks like the foreground is very crisp and very sharp, you know, very near. Then I'm gonna grab another graduated filter and just drag it over the entire top portion of the image right here, over all of these mountains and kind of everything that is in the distance. Here you want to make sure that you have a pretty soft edge as well, and this time I'm gonna go minus clarity, so that way you really get the effect of distance and very hazy and mist in the back, and that way you get the sense of depth and the sense of foreground and background, which is even more pronounced. So here is without any graduated filter, and here's after, so it really gives a lot of complexity and a lot of differentiation to your picture. So anyways, I think I'm really done here with this picture. It really was an in-depth tutorial, a very long one, but I really just wanted to show you every single step from front to back, from start to finish. So here is the raw file, and here is what we've made out of it. So you can see it's definitely in a huge change, and I really love this look of the picture that we've ended up with. If you've enjoyed this video and if you would like to see more videos just like this one, Lightroom edits, landscape photography videos and all kind of stuff, be sure to subscribe. I upload one video every single day of the week. And if you've enjoyed this video, please take a second to click this thumbs up button. It really helps me out a ton and is hugely appreciated. And if you did not like the video and if you did not learn anything, please be sure to dislike the video so I can improve my videos in the future. Thank you very much for watching and bearing with me through these 30 minutes of me talking. I really do appreciate that. I want to wish you a great day, great pictures, and please take care.